Hey guys, how's it going? Ghost Richard today, and today we are going to install this Thermaltake RGB water 3.0 120. As you can see, we have an old Thermaltake 2.0 warm in here, and it's been going for probably a long time. I couldn't even tell you. It's been through a couple builds, so this is going to get swapped out of my buddy's PC here. So the first thing we're going to want to do is you can take your covers off just by, if you have thumb screws, just loosen those thumb screws. If it's a Phillips, take the Phillips off, and you just take them off. And you're going to want to do front and back. If you have glass panels, please be very careful. Put them down on a blanket if you have your bed or something, and make sure everyone in the room knows what's going on, because you don't want to break them, especially the glass ones. After we have them, I'll show you why we need access to the back. See this? We're going to have a holder on the back from which holds your CPU. You're going to want access from that just in case whichever one you had on here before. As you can see, this one's going to be easy. It's just a couple Phillips here, and that'll come off, and we'll just take off these I/O connectors here. If you had a fan in here, a factory fan, just disconnect it from the CPU header, which you'll see on there. It'll say CPU fan on your motherboard. This motherboard, it's right off the side there. And there's also one up here. That one's actually the CPU up here. Okay, let's just unplug this. If yours is right there, unplug that. And if it's the factory cooler, just loosen off your 4 bolts. If you have an old AIO, you're just gonna slide that out. If you have a pump one, you'll unplug that. And we're just gonna do all 4. And then for us, we have the old fan right here. We're gonna pop that off. After you pop out these 4 screws, all you do is you take your AIO radiator, put it up here, and then you pull out the 4 on the back, and you'll notice it after you do that. And again, that's only if you're pulling out an old AIO. If you've got just an old fan cooler on here, it'll just be the 4 bolts. And then just make sure you pop that bracket off of the back that was holding that, because we're going to change that when we put in the new cooler. So once this is free, this is off. Now it's time to clean off the old thermal paste. You can just take a rag with a little bit of alcohol. Make sure it's just alcohol, so that way it evaporates quickly and doesn't get water everywhere. You don't want to use water. Just wipe this up. So don't do it over top of your computer case, but you just put a little bit of alcohol like that on it, and literally just take it like that and ground yourself on your case. Again, the grounding thing on your case only 100% works if your power supply is actually plugged in, because otherwise your case isn't grounded 100%. But just don't do it on carpet. I don't know. I've yet to blow something because of static. So after you do that, you'll swell that alcohol, give it a second as it evaporates. After it evaporates, which it will, you can actually watch it. I don't know if it'll show up on my camera, but if there's a little bit of residue, you can actually watch it disappear. Wipe my oils. You don't want any oils or anything on there, because then it'll cause a little bit of a barrier. And with it being clean like that, now we can unbox our new one. So just show this one over here. We're gonna unbox it here. Take a look what's in here. We're gonna pull out our new fan, which is RB or RGB. We have our new radiator, which looks pretty much like our old one. Nothing's really changed on that front. And we'll make sure that this is everything. Okay, that is everything. So, fan is this way. If we look at our fan, it's hard to see. There's an arrow to show you which way you should aim it if you want to aim it up, and which way it's going to shoot. And you can see the arrows pointing this way. If you don't have a dust filter on here, you want it to shoot out of your case. So what you'd want to do is just do something like this. I'm going to unwrap the wiring first so it's up a little bit. But yes, like I said, just make sure it shoots out of the case, which this way it will. And mount it in front of the radiator. You can either have it so it pulls the heat out of the radiator, or you can mount it right here and it'll actually push the air through the radiator. I will leave that up to you. If you're doing an AMD socket, Thermaltake's changed things up a bit. You can actually leave those two on there, because what they're going to do is they'll leave those 2 attachments, and then the new one, when you go to screw it in, you'd click on this attachment, So it aims down, and you just want to line it up so that's straight up and down, so that way your symbol lines up on here. But in my case, I removed those previously to be able to hook up an old or the new cooler, because they on the previous model used a back plate. The problem is I don't have the old AMD connections, so I'm gonna have to do it kind of like how you would do an Asus, or not an Asus, but an Intel one. So Intel would be with this, where you slide the back plate on, and then you would slide this into the cooler. So when you go to hook one of these coolers up, you'll see that it's got a bunch of teeth on it. You slide this in past the teeth, or put the teeth through these holes, and then you turn it sideways and then put the locking ring on. But only lock it in once you know it's going to be straight up and down, otherwise it'll be cockeyed on your motherboard and that might drive your OCD crazy. So for me, I just lucked out. My old one, which is this Thermaltake 2.0, is the exact same thing still. Like, they haven't changed the actual mounting size or anything. So what it's going to be is, see this? This doesn't come with a kit. This is from my old Thermaltake, and it's actually the same tooth size and everything. So I'm going to lock this in on the new Thermaltake and use this. So the one I'm using, keep in mind, is not for this one. If you have the new AMD, you would literally you'd keep the factory hooks, and it would literally, after you line that up with the teeth and click in your ring, you would just lock it in and then screw your screw down, and that would be it. As you can see, you got your teeth. Now this is for this cooler. You can treat it kind of like if you have the Intel one, but see how we have the TT on there? We want to keep that lined up. So you want to see how I'm sliding it in here? Turn it and twist. And right there, it'll be lined up. With those hooks locked in like that, you take this ring and it just goes into four of the open holes like that. You just press it in. And the teeth from the ring just press right in, and it locks it in. You might have to push up on the ring, it's a little fun. But as you can see now, if I'm looking at it, it's going to be completely lined up when I bolt that in. And that's what you're looking to happen. And same with the AMD. If you're doing the AMD one, turn it sideways and make sure those pins, the hook and the screw are completely up and down, just like that. Now that this is ready, we can go and we can either tighten this on first or screw in our radiator. I will leave it up to you. I think for me, all I'm going to do is quickly bolt this in. You do have pre-applied thermal paste on here. You could, if you want to, wipe it off and put your own. I just kind of smudged mine with my finger. But again, when you bolt it on, or put it on, just remember to either do the cross pattern, but don't go too crazy with it. It is going to spread out. So if you start going and putting a bunch of thermal paste on, when you go to screw this on, it could actually have negative effects, and it could splooge over the sides, which is not what you want. You want it to just cover the die. But yeah, once it's pre-applied like that, if it's the AMD one, just go ahead and get the first hook locked in, put it down, and then when you tighten that screw, it should lock the second hook in to pull it closer. If it's the AMD one, or sorry, the Intel one, or this bracket right here, all you do is you screw in these thumb screws like that until it tightens in. And yeah, that's all you're going to do is continue. I don't even, they do perfect. They still give you these posts. So you'd put the posts or the screws in, depending on which socket you have. If you have the 1156 and stuff, just follow what it says for that one. It'll show you the different post sizes, because there will be two different post sizes. So 1156, 1155, these are for your newer ones and stuff like that. So when you go to bolt this on, just make sure you use the right post size, which it'll show you two different ones. So this one with little snub end right here, that one is for 2066, and then the long one's right here, from which you're going to screw into that back plate. So once you sink that black back plate on, then you would grab this post and thread it into the back plate, so it's just sitting there. And then when you drop your cooler on and this comes through the hole like that, you would then put your thumb screws on and tighten them up. You might be tempted to grab your screwdriver and start cranking on these. Don't do it. Don't crank it down. Just do it finger tight, or if you have to, just a little quarter turn with it. But because you don't want to go too tight, otherwise it won't sit balanced on the socket, and then you'll run into heating issues. So as you're tightening it, tighten this one, then tighten this corner, then tighten this corner, then tighten this corner, and snug it up first. Don't instantly crank them all the way down as you go down, because you're trying to basically bring this down so it goes down level onto the socket, and then you snug it down so that way the heat transfer is good. If you have one corner more tight than the other, then the die could sit offset and not completely cool. All right, I'm going to quickly go ahead and put my back plate back on here and then tighten these. So after you grab your back plate, if you have Intel and you sink it on like that, this is where you would grab your threaded post right here and you would screw it on so that way you have your stanchion in there. But we are not going to have to use that. For me, it's different. But yeah, again, grab this, screw it into that back plate, which is already back there with the threads, and get it nice and tight in there. And then from there, you can just grab your, this would be on there, and you would just sink it on and then tighten those thumb screws. So we're going to line this up. Again, fan pushing out of the case. And I'm putting these tubes up top. You'll see why in a sec. That way the coil stays away from my graphics card and goes up. And all I'm going to do from there is put in these longer screws, and they're going to go in right here and drive into the side of my radiator. So the longer screws go in on this side. Little screw on a washer, and just, let's see if I could do it. Docking, yes. Obviously make sure they just go in straight and strong, and just put 4 of those bad boys in. Now that this is all in, let's start the wiring. So right off of this one comes right off the Thermaltake. You'll see right there that in the back, this 4-pin connector, we're only going to use the first 3. That's a CPU one. You can tell, it's hard for me to show you here, but it'll say right on CPU fan. So just plug it into that, and we're going to plug into here. If you have an AIO pump one, you can always use that. Just follow your diagram. Basically, the pump is meant to run full speed all the time. Once we have the motherboard plugged in up there, you're going to notice you have these 2 connectors here, this 3rd one here. So let's go over these other wiring harnesses. This is your controller. If you're going to use a controller, like a manual controller, if you're not going to use a manual controller because your motherboard is newer and has on your MSI, your ASRock, your Gigabit, or your ASUS, you'll notice that there are different headers that they call Aura, something else, something else, something else. They all have their own name, like Auras and whatnot. You need to look for this LED header. If you don't have this on your motherboard because it's not made within the last few years, and you don't have a controller built in your board, if you have an aftermarket one because you have a big bunch of strips all over there, you can look for that plug-in. If you don't have that plug-in on any of your stuff, don't worry, that's what this controller is for, which you can mount inside your case over here and whatnot, and you can run your wiring along the inside and down here, and then just mount this with double-sided sticky or something. We're not going to worry about that for now. What we're going to worry about is if you have an ASUS motherboard, you would use this wiring harness to plug it in. If you have an MSI motherboard, you would use this harness. Same with ASRock. If you have Gigabit, it requires this F harness right here. If you don't, you plan on using the header and you plan on using the controller because your motherboard doesn't have it, check your motherboard manual or look it up online. For this motherboard, it's way too old. It's not going to work. take this, plug it into here, and then take this end, plug it into either the header here or into your controller right here. Next thing you're going to connect is this one right here. And that, if you have two CPU fan plugins, perfect. This motherboard does not have two CPU fan plugins. So you can either Y connect off of there if you have a Y connector and have them both running off that, or you go off the CPU chassis fan from down here and just plug it in to down here and plug it into there. Last connector you need to plug in is just this connector right here. Plugs into SATA power. And this is magnetic. Just stick it there. I've just sort of slapped this. I've put my wiring back here. This case is so old, it's really a nightmare to wire manage. But what's going to happen now is, see all this extra? It's going to come up here, and I'm going to tie wrap it so it's up and past the tubes here, so it'll blend with the tubes, which will be up here. Just not going to, so it'll look like that. And then this black power wire right here will get tucked in behind as well, like that. So it'll look like this. And then this is just a nightmare. This is all his drive cables here. Again, to wire manage this properly, we would need a new case, and I'm only going to be doing Thermaltake. So let's imagine these red wires aren't here. My wire management isn't too bad. I ended up tucking it in and along here to the CPU header. And so if we take a look here, we've got some beautiful things. It actually, because that's so shiny, it looks like the header is also rainbow. That one noisy fan is this one. The bearings are definitely going. These ones aren't too bad. The pump has a bit of whine, which you're used to. At least we know it's working. And then if we go over to our controller, we can of course do color speeds, mode. Let's hit the mode. It's on the same mode. It might be because, let's hit mode right there. I'm hitting all of them. Whoa. You can see it slowing down on the fan. Oh, that's the speed. Oh wow, that's kind of trippy. You can now actually see it slowing down as I hit the different speeds. That's one speed. A little faster. All right, let's hit the other mode. Oh, there. We have red. Yellow. Guess that's a green. Oh, no light at all. Oh, that's weird. That's cool. Just spins into different colors, I'm guessing. Yep. That's kind of neat. Just continuously changes. And color is down there, so, or sorry, no, I just hit the speed. There, that's our different colors. That looks neat. Purple, light blue, red, green. Well, that's more green. Blue, purple. So you can just play around with this. I don't know how well it would match up because we don't have a, oh, flashing. Be careful if you're an epileptic. And then just solid color. And of course, rainbow phase in and out. And no color whatsoever. So again, slow it down or speed it up. So if you have the header though, that header joint, so you can go right into your color system on your motherboard, you would download the corresponding app. And again, they probably will be, just look up Asus LED controller, which would be Aorus, or if you've plugged it into a Corsair box, just look up Corsair LED controller, or if it's just basically look up the corresponding one. They all have a different name, and it'll even have it listed in your motherboard. If you have your motherboard drivers downloaded and you have a color schemed motherboard, you would just use that to control it. Anyways, that's really all there is to it. Thanks again for watching this. Press like if it helped you out, and subscribe for more. If you're wondering about idling temperatures, that's how cool we're staying. Of course, depending on the size and how much and what you're doing, you can always try a render test and see what it hits. I'm sure someone else has render tests and stuff like that. Anyways, just wanted to show you that it's idling pretty darn good for what it is.